Welcome to the Think Fitness Life podcast, where we bring the mind, body, and gym together so you can improve your health, increase performance, and live your best life. For more information, visit thinkfitnesslife.com. Here are your hosts, Matt Gluckman and Eric Menchie.
What's up, everybody? I had the pleasure to interview James Cerbie in this last interview, and he's had a lot of experiences under his belt that have really shaped him into the person he's become. I use this coaching myself, actually, Train Heroic, but he is the founder of Rebel Performance. Rebel Performance is a strength conditioning company dedicated to helping thinking athletes become the total package and perform pain-free. For more information, you can check out rebel-performance.com and enjoy the interview. Peace. Dude, it was so funny. I was actually on your website and I saw a little ticker that was like, someone just bought Mass 2 in like North Carolina. And I was like, oh my gosh, I've done Mass 2 by Pat Davidson back in the Equinox on the East Coast there in Boston. All these guys out of Springfield. And I think Pat Davidson was a coach at Springfield.
He was a professor at Springfield. Yeah, that's right.
Nice. Yeah. So how did you meet him?
I met Pat, Christ, that was probably almost a decade ago now. I was interning at Cressy Performance up in Massachusetts.
Okay, you did work up there.
And Pat came in to do an in-service for us when I was there. And so that was the initial meeting of the minds.
Yeah, right. Mm-hmm. And then just like things blew up from there, I'm sure.
Yeah, we just stayed in touch from there and are fortunate to kind of have a pretty good relationship today.
Yeah. That's just so funny because, you know, I got hooked up with your work and your training out here in Utah, but I also came from the background of being up in the Northeast, and I worked with a lot of other trainers who had been trained at Cressy's Sports Performance. But yeah, it's just so funny. It's the East Coast connection. So yeah, let's start with the origin story, brother. When did you get started with training?
Oh boy, I was in middle school. Like we want to go back to like when I
Kanye West of training.
Like when I first walked into a weight room, I was like, I want to do that. Like I want to lift weights. Is that where we want to start?
Yeah, let's start where the spark was born.
Okay, so like any young male, I had this idea in my mind, like I just wanted to be jacked, right? Like this was back in the day when The Rock was still competing in professional wrestling.
Right.
And I can remember having like one of those SI for Kids magazines and like seeing him, like some other people in there. I'm like, man, I want to look like that. Right. Or you have like Arnold Schwarzenegger or whatever. So I was like, I'm just going to go work out, because that's clearly how that happens, is I just go lift weights. So I walked into the weight room. I was in 6th grade. So I walk into the weight room, and obviously the first thing I do is grab an easy curl bar and just start doing curls, because that's how this works.
Right.
Fortunately, we had a pretty good strength and conditioning coach at my high school. And so he came over to me and saw me doing the curls, and I was like, what are you doing? I was like, I have no idea what I'm doing. He's like, put that down, follow me, come over here. And so that's what, like, we started squats, we started benching, we started doing Olympic lifts, kind of like more of a classic model of strength conditioning. Mm-hmm. But that's where it all started for me. It was probably 6th or 7th grade. And then it just blew up and grew from there, because I was football, basketball, baseball player growing up. Mm-hmm. Baseball is my biggest love. Went and played that in college, but like you realize at a pretty early age, if you're playing competitively, that your capacity to be bigger, faster, and stronger is going to be a huge differentiator. Absolutely. And so I gravitated towards the weight room, knowing that was going to hopefully give me a leg up in my capacity on the field. And then throughout that process, ended up just falling in love with the weight room itself and just like the actual act of lifting weights.
Just like pushing yourself to failure and seeing what you're capable of and all that jazz.
Yeah.
So who was that first strength and conditioning coach? Do you know his name? Do you remember?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. So people, if you have anybody from the CrossFit world, so Andy Hendel was my high school strength and conditioning coach. His son, Spencer Hendel, competed in CrossFit for a long time. We were good friends. We played baseball together growing up. And yeah, so Andy played in the NFL, was a linebacker for the Dolphins. He was a defensive coordinator for our football team, and he ran the whole weight room. And so he was the one that got me started.
That's awesome.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, talent breeds success. So right off the gate, you had like a great strength and conditioning coach. I want to talk a little bit about like kind of how that shaped your philosophy and your outlook training for strength.
Interesting journey to where I went through very what we'll call classic strength and conditioning model, where most people are trained like a football player, and then within that you're trained largely like a power lifter. Like we squat, we bench, we power clean. There's not a whole lot of foresight into movement, biomechanics, movement quality, etc. So like that model worked to get me stronger, bigger, more explosive, more athletic. But in college, I started running into a lot of injury issues, like lots of pulled quads. I had 2 stress fractures in my back. And so like I started to run into this issue of the weight room causing problems. And so when I came out of college, like that experience made me very jaded towards like the whole gambit. Like I didn't love what I was told when I went and saw a physical therapist. They're like, oh, you just have tight hamstrings. We just need to stretch your hamstrings more. Right. And so like I kind of saw this part of our industry and it failed me and it didn't work well for me.
Yeah.
And so I came out of college being like, I want to, like, there's got to be a better way, right? There has to be a better answer to this. I should be able to be bigger, faster, stronger without feeling like a dumpster fire and always getting injured.
Right.
And so that was when I first ended up finding Eric Cressy, because I had a buddy at that time in Boston who'd been following him. He was like, hey, I think you'd really like this guy up in Boston named Eric Cressy. He's doing really cool things. I know you're really interested in this movement anatomy biomechanics realm. Like this dude deadlifts 600 pounds, but then also talks about how to move well and feel good in the process and not just get totally beat to shit.
Which was pretty unheard of at the time.
Yeah, like way ahead of the time, because him and Mike Robertson were really leading the charge on that. Because we were talking 10, 15 plus years ago at this point. Like back in the day, like when they were originally writing for T Nation and stuff like that. And we started having this corrective exercise conversation. And so like that experience for me, if we want to relate this back to strength, was huge, because like having really good mentors early on with my experience, I very quickly realized like I don't care about the implement in question. I'm not married to anything. I'm married to what the outcome is. Right. So I don't care about using a straight bar. I don't like, I want the outcome, right? There are going to be a lot of different tools in my toolbox that can get me this outcome.
Right.
But what's going to be the best tool for the job that's going to get me the biggest outcome with the lowest risk? That's going to be the best choice for this human in terms of movement ability.
You don't necessarily care about what the Instagram police would say about a straight bar with no straps, with no belt, and all those stuff. It's just about like, what's going to make me faster, what's going to make me move well and have good movement health. It's just a really important pivot that I feel like happens at a stage in everyone's life. I just feel like, because you talk to a lot of young kids in the gym, or young kids that I'm sure come to you all the time for training, and you can sometimes be talking about at least maybe this isn't your experience, but sometimes this is mine. We can be talking about the importance of technique and form, and yet they can still get by with lifting with bad technique and come back right. I remember the first time I started getting those like pains from excessive lifting. I'm like, man, we got to switch this up. So I just feel like it's almost like part of the journey. Every lifter has to kind of go through that.
Yeah, if you train enough, you're going to run into it. And I like to describe it essentially as it's really a convex curve, right? And so what you end up seeing from people is, right, like the front half of a convex curve tends to be pretty flat without much change. But then we start getting on the uptick part of the curve. Once you're on the uptick, things start happening really rapidly. And like that's most people's training experience. Like I'm training, things are going great, I feel awesome, blah, 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 blah. And then it's like, well, now my shoulder's kind of hurting and my back's hurting and it's getting worse and it's not getting any better, right? And once you get on that part of the curve, it gets really frustrating. Because it's like, what am I doing wrong? What I've been doing has been working. But now I feel like poop. And so like that's where you usually have to have that revelation, the light bulb moment of, okay, I need to rethink the model. I need to rethink how I'm approaching this.
Well, that's the beauty that comes down into having a coach and then also programming appropriately, because I feel like the right coach, and definitely you do, because I've done your programs for the last 3, 4, 5 months, thinks of all that stuff and is already set up in a way that it's not adding drops to the bucket that lead to that convex curve, right? Like, because Because usually it's somebody who maybe is a little bit more kyphotic in their rowing or their pressing, or they're a little bit too rounded in their lower back when they're deadlifting or whatever. And then all of a sudden it's like adding a little drop into the bucket of extra low back tightness or extra QL engagement or extra, pec minor engagement. And then that drop in the bucket just keeps getting bigger and bigger until it's pain. And by the time you hit pain, that's usually when people want to do something about it. But, you're definitely that methodical coach that's trying to be proactive to that.
Mm-hmm.
So where were you in the high school with your first strength and conditioning coach?
Mm-hmm.
Where were you? What state was that?
Charlotte, North Carolina.
Okay. And then college was?
Davidson College, which is about 45 minutes north of Charlotte.
Okay. Gotcha. And then how'd you get linked up with Cressy? Did you just go up there for like a summer or something?
Yeah, so I went up there for their internship program.
Okay, gotcha. Mm-hmm. Gotcha.
And then went straight from there to Indianapolis and interned at IFAS with Mike Robertson and Bill Hartman.
Okay, nice. And then from there to Utah, kept going west?
There, I ended up going back to Boston to work at a gym in Boston. And then after doing that, called Pure Performance Training.
Okay.
We had a really, really good crew there, and I was there for a little over a year, and then that was when I made the decision I want to go back to grad school, and so came out to Salt Lake City.
We're talking about kind of being proactive to prevent the cases where you have to take a step back from training, or you have to like kind of deload for a week or something, especially online, but more so just in your whole training philosophy. How do you make sure you're staying on top of that?
Yeah, so I think it really depends. So there are a couple of levels here. The first level is going to be like the individual in question. What are their outcome goals? What's their background? What's their history, right? Because if we're talking just Gen Pop, they're only going to train 2 to 3 days a week, then I don't have to worry about the periodization scheme nearly as much. I guess 2 to 3 days a week, like we're just going to train, right? And then within that scheme, though, we had to figure out what exercise selection is going to be right for them, right? So the exercise selection variable is going to be important regardless of who we work with, whether that's Gen Pop or whether that's going to be more of like our bread and butter, which is kind of that thinking athlete. They're going to be training 4 to 6 days a week. They're going to be pushing the gas pedal, right? And so the exercise selection comes in to be really, really big here. And so like that's a huge realm in terms of like how we choose exercises, why we choose them. The simplest version of this is just really hammer home the importance of that stack position, right? Like we've trained thousands of athletes at this point. I've done so many in-person assessments and training sessions. I can tell you that pretty much no one's walking through the door like in
a good posture,
in a good position, right? Like we have people that do a poor job controlling a rib cage and a pelvis that leaks out into poor scapulohumeral rhythm. Arms aren't working well, legs aren't working well, right? There are patterns that you see that are really consistent as well. So right off the bat, like we are going to choose exercises that are going to, no pun intended, stack the deck in your favor, right? Because I want to see this good rib down, pelvis under position so that I give your arms and legs a chance to work well. So we're going to choose exercises that are going to try to drive that home for you, right? We also have to consider what. Go ahead.
I was just saying, like, kind of right along, like, build a strong posterior chain and allow that spine to stay in a good S position.
Yeah, I mean, the posterior chain gets a little bit tricky because sometimes people do that too much. Like, there's this notion that you need a really strong back. Most people's backs are already plenty strong and they're already plenty shortened. What they actually need is to learn how to get their ribs down and tuck their pelvis under because they can't use their abs. Can't use their side abs because they're in a lengthened position. So like we got a lot of people that come to us more from that background of like, hey, like I need to be doing more like back extensions and all this other stuff. And I need to be doing more hamstring work. It's like you need to be doing more hamstring work, but on the average, right, we're kind of talking averages of what we see here. On the average, people we get are going to have a pelvis that's rolled forward, ribs that are kind of like driving up, out, externally rotated. With that being what it is, I have lengthened hamstrings in the back. They're going to feel really tight. So if I tested hamstring length, they're actually going to look short.
Right.
But they're actually long, right? If you think about the hamstring attachment on the back, if you roll the pelvis forward, the hamstring gets pulled long.
Right, exactly. But it's just a trick. It's just because your hips are in the right position.
You're starting however many degrees behind the starting line, which is why your hamstrings look short on a table. But if you just try to stretch that, then you're going to cause problems.
And instead of having someone just do like a conventional RDL, you're going to want to shorten that hamstring and get them to do like a hamstring curl, whether it's a physio ball or a band or something like that.
Something like that. Like we'll still use RDLs. Like the RDL is a phenomenal teaching tool. Like I think a really good hinge is one of the hardest things to pull off well.
Mm-hmm.
And so this is where you have to be good about figuring out how do you integrate all of this together, right? Because like we're trying to improve movement, but at the same time, like we're getting a training effect, right? Because the way I think about it is anybody I work with, like they're generally 5 pillars, right? 5 outcomes I'm looking for: strength, hypertrophy, power, endurance, and movement.
And that's your 5-pillar approach?
Yeah. So essentially, like those are like your attribute bars. I want you to have all of those attribute bars, but exactly how high we're going to put up each one depends upon you and your specific goals.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So when I'm trying to choose exercises, when I'm designing a program, I'm trying to figure out which attribute bars are we chasing? What's the best tool for the job? What exercise can deliver on this? But it's also going to make sure we feel good while we do it.
Yeah. I think attention to detail goes such a long way there because, you can tell someone to do an RDL, or you can, cue someone to tuck that tailbone down and really drive through that medial hamstring, and they can be doing something appropriate that's going to reflect over to their performance on the field or whatever they're trying to do.
Mm-hmm.
So I feel like a lot of this comes down to, it's not really like, don't get me wrong, like you are doing something special, but it's not like doing something crazy and reinventing the wheel. It's just about doing it with a greater attention to the details. And it almost seems like you allow them to get the training effect and the results you're looking for with your cueing. Like, I mean, I look at your library or the workout of that day, and there'll be like 5 things that are simple, but 5 things to focus on with that exercise that really drive that positioning home for that exercise.
Yeah, and that's where it kind of depends. Like if we're working with you one-on-one, we can get far more granular in our exercise selection because we can take you through a very in-depth assessment process.
Absolutely.
But on our training team, or if I'm just writing a pre-written program, I'm writing to the average, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because like I've seen enough athletes at this point, I know what 90% of people walking through the door are going to look like.
Lowest common denominator.
So I'm going to program to what those 90% probably need.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But
and you're dealing with mostly athletes. Is that pretty fair to say? Athletes and other trainers.
Yeah. So like we'll define our own athletes really, because like we're not working with people that are playing competitive sports per se.
Right.
Like that's the hard part. Like I think if you're a human, you're an athlete.
Yeah. I
so
agree.
Like really, realistically,
everyone's an athlete.
Yeah, everyone's an athlete. Like that's just part of being human. And so our bread and butter, who we really train, are going to be like, I call them thinking athletes. They were probably an athlete in high school and or college. They want to try to understand why they're doing what they're doing. Like they want an answer. They don't want to just do this because I tell you so. They want to understand why they're doing what they're doing. Right. So they're probably 28. They're 30 years old, plus or minus a few years. Former athlete, but they still want to be strong. They want to be jacked. They want to be powerful. They want to have endurance. So that is essentially who we train.
And, I think it's also important to share because, like, not only do we get some people who are like general pop, athlete-minded people listening to our podcast looking for goals for themselves, but also a lot of trainers too. So along your journey, do you have any notable shifts kind of in your mindset or your philosophy along your road that you'd care to share?
Yeah, so these happen relatively regularly. So like the first big shift in mindset came doing the internships with Cressy and then at iFast, especially like the time spent with Bill Hartman.
Yeah.
That was like a huge mindset shift for me. So like at that point in time, PRI was very early on. People were really just starting to get into it. Mm-hmm. So getting a very, very, very good accelerated education in the PRI model was huge. Mm-hmm. There are a lot of people I know that like there's still tons of arguments surrounding PRI. I'm not married to any letters or one model. Like I don't care if you're FMS, PRI, whatever the fuck it's going to be called, right? Like I care about being able to deliver outcomes. From my experience to date, the PRI lens is still the best lens to look through. The downside of that model is it's highly complex, has a huge learning curve. So when I see people who are attacking the model and saying it doesn't work, it's usually a user error. It's not a model error.
Or they're not fully understanding the model because
yeah, that's the user error, right? It's like
okay.
they just, that's the hard part about that model. Like your anatomy,
Yeah.
biomechanics, everything needs to be so good.
But
And it's going to take a ton of time.
I just love their attention to detail in their model, though, because like right off the gate, they're like, "Listen, you have so many asymmetries. Like you're not gonna move well. Like it's almost like right off the bat, like if you just don't take anything into account, you're gonna end up to injury." And it's true. It's pretty true. You know, like the uneducated, untrained individual that just steps into the weight room, most often than not, is gonna find themselves in injury position.
Yeah, I mean, like one of the big takeaways is that there is no such thing as good posture, right? Good posture is inherently dynamic.
Move out of. Yeah, right.
Yeah, it's inherently dynamic. It's phase change. It's your capacity to be in and out of different stances. The only bad posture is a posture that can't change.
Right.
Right. Like
I love that line.
There are people who want to make the argument. They're like, well, sitting all day is bad. Well, standing all day at a desk is also equally as bad.
Mm-hmm.
Like anything that's not changing would be air quotes, right? Air quotes, bad posture. Posture is the capacity to change shapes and alternate and be reciprocal. And so like that is a huge foundation of how we think about programming and training and exercise selection. And anytime we're chasing performance, there's going to be a balancing act there, right? Because like the thing that you need, if you want to, like, you can use powerlifting as an example. If you want to be the best powerlifter in the world, then like we are going to be selectively removing your variability, your capacity to have different movement options.
Yeah.
If you want to be the best sprinter in the world, like your job is literally to run in a straight line between two white lines, 100 meters. Like you don't need as much variability. You don't need as many movement options. If I gave you that, I would probably make you worse.
Right.
So it's a balancing act of like, I need to give you just as much as you need so that you can stay healthy and feel good.
Mm-hmm.
But then I don't want to give you too much. And this is where like that conversation is really important of what's the outcome I want? What does this person want and need? Like that's goals. Where like there's so many layers of the conversation of figuring out how we blend and put this all together. Right.
Yeah.
Generally speaking, for our people, it's like we want the performance outcome. Like if you're working with us, it's because you want a performance outcome. We're not the like, I have one band and a kettlebell and I just want to like lose a little bit of weight company.
Right.
The way I describe our athletes is they're on the highway going 120 miles an hour. They just have no idea where they're going and the car's out of control. So our job is to jump in and steer the car. Right. Like
that's a great analogy.
The effort and the intent is there. Like they want to be better.
Mm-hmm.
Like they enjoy working hard. They enjoy being in the weight room. It's probably their favorite part of the day.
Yeah.
Right. We just need to jump in and steer the car and give them the directions and funnel that effort through a system that actually works and gets them the outcome they want without them feeling like poop along the way.
And when you're focused on performance, you're kind of innately focused on longevity because you're trying to get them prepared for any movement, any direction, any explosiveness, whatever their body demands, whatever their sport demands. Like you said, just 120 miles down the road, no direction, but want to be staying on that road as long as they can. So have you always been online with Rebel?
Yes. Nice. Rebel has always been purely online, but like all of the first 8 years of my career were all in person.
Okay.
Like well over 10,000 hours of on the floor coaching and training.
Yeah, right. How many years has Rebel been going?
I will say Rebel has actually really been a business for the last 2 years. It has existed longer than that. So it's probably actually been in existence more like 6 years.
Okay.
But like when I was still in-person coaching, especially when I was in graduate school, I wasn't doing anything for it. It existed. Like I pretty much had a domain name. You could land the domain, you could buy some programs, get online coaching. Right. But I wasn't doing anything for the
actively
business.
With it.
Yeah. And so when I left grad school, like Rebel Performance is my full-time job. So it's really only been a business for 2 years. Before that, it was a hobby.
Gotcha. Mm-hmm. You were still doing the podcast and we do writing blogs and stuff like that?
No, that's really only been within the last 2 years.
2 years? Okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Do you do any speaking events or anything?
Yeah, I will. It depends on the topic, where it is, kind of what we're trying to accomplish.
Yeah, I'm
hmm
sure COVID probably put a little damper on that too.
Sometimes, yeah. I mean, like I don't really schedule tons of speaking gigs. It's more of like if somebody wants me to come talk.
Oh, that's not like what you'd want to do. It just sounds like because you know you're really articulate and you're well spoken and you make it simple enough that someone like myself can understand it. So I just thought maybe you'd like I could see you being on a podium with the whiteboard or at the screen
I
behind
enjoy
you.
doing it. Yeah, like
Yeah.
I enjoy teaching. Like I originally went back to grad school because I wanted to get a PhD and go be a professor and teach.
Oh, okay.
Right, but then I realized
Nice.
that that's a very difficult path to be on. Not many of those jobs exist. You're more likely
Yeah.
going to be a PhD who needs to live in research and write grants to pay yourself.
Right.
And it's
Right.
like I just enjoy coaching more than writing grants. So,
Right. There's a lot of red tape with the other route.
mhm.
What were you going to teach? Out of curiosity, what was
So
your
my degree was
interest?
going to be in integrative physiology.
Okay, so you were going to be kind of in the same realm. You were just going to
Mhm.
be teaching like the body and mechanics and stuff. That's awesome. So I'm curious with the online space because it sounds like you dabbled and dipped your toes in the water a little bit before COVID happened, and then COVID really sparked every trainer and their mother to go online with some sort of product. What are some of the big challenges you had to overcome when you in the last, I guess, 2 years or 3 years to really amplify this into a business online?
Yeah, the biggest challenge right when COVID happened is that all the gyms shut down and our population, our clientele need gyms. So
With
that
your
was,
programming, yeah.
yeah, right. Like we're not a minimalist at home company. Like you need a barbell, plates, a rack, dumbbells, kettlebells, some type of conditioning equipment. That would be like the baseline. If you have kettlebells and you have like the power blocks that are adjustable dumbbells up to like 90 or 100 pounds and a few other
We might
things,
be able to make it work,
we can
right?
probably make that work for one-on-one coaching. But anything else we do, you need a gym.
Yeah.
Right. So when the gym shut down, we were kind of in a little bit of a waiting game. Right. So if you go in our program shop, you'll find about 10 at home programs that you can do with like next to no equipment because that became an immediate need for people.
Right.
Like we wrote those essentially for our athletes because they're like, yo, I don't have anything. Like, what
Yeah.
can I do at home with essentially nothing and just hold on to my training outcome and my training effect as much as I can? Because you're not going to get
Sprint.
better.
Sprint.
Yeah. If you can, right? But you're not going to make gains in that situation. We're just trying to hold on for dear life as best we can.
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah. But what about accountability? Did you ever find any issues with that?
Not really. You're talking about in terms of like our clients, our athletes online, like doing their stuff.
Just right, like holding them accountable to what you write for them, or getting the most out of what your biggest exercise is for them. But yeah, so how do you overcome hurdles like that or issues like that, or if you have them?
Yeah. So I think a lot of that comes down to one, how you onboard people, the expectations that you set up front. I think two, your price helps to determine that. Like we're not cheap. We're intentionally not cheap. So if you're going to spend the money to work with us, then I'm imagining you're going to do the work or else you're just wasting your money. We have the community, the team-based atmosphere, which is huge. We try to get people competing on a nearly daily basis. You have a direct DM thread with your coach. You have bi-weekly check-in forms. If you're a one-on-one client, then like the only reason we only update your program if you send us your feedback. Right. It's like we have check-ins along the way to say like we are going to ask that. We expect a lot of you. We expect you to take ownership of what you're doing. We're here to help you. We're going to put in tons of time, effort, and our energy to help you get to where you want to be, to help you reach your goals. Right. But it's not a one-way street. Like if you're not willing to show up and put in the effort to leave notes, to track weights, to send us feedback, then like
then you can't do anything.
Yeah. Like I'm not going to chase you down. That's my big thing. Like
and how can you make it a directive change without knowing where they're at or any feedback?
Yeah. So like our athletes know that. We make that really clear up front for them. Our one-on-one clients have to sign a athlete expectation agreement that clearly dictates what they have, like our expectations for them. And then people on our training team are quickly put into an environment where that's the standard.
Yeah. Yeah. And it really seems like, obviously I'm someone who speaks from experience, that the way you operate is you kind of integrate things into their life with, the email that's the check-in, the the chat bubble right there for any notes in a particular exercise. It's like you are meeting them more than 50-50 to kind of ensure that you get that feedback and ensure that you get that accountability piece on top of the fact that the price is the accountability, anchor as well.
Yeah. I mean, we are the only online coaching company I know of that has a 90-day guarantee for all of our coaching
that's
programs.
awesome.
Right. But that 90-day guarantee comes with, like, you have to do, like, you can't just be here for 90 days and ask for your money back. Like, you've got to do at least 85% of your workouts. You have to DM your coach every week. You have to post in the forum every week. So yeah, we'll give you your money back if you actually do the work and don't get the outcomes.
Right.
So far, that's never happened.
Yeah. That's great.
If you show up and do the work, you get the outcome.
Yeah.
And so, like, generally, like 100%, if you show up and you do the work, we do what we tell you to do, and you're not happy with the results, you shouldn't have to pay for it because that's on us.
Yeah.
Like 100%.
Right. No, I love that. I love that you can stand by your product like that. And it just talks to the authenticity and the genuinity of what you do and how you're not out to just make $1. Because I think there's a lot of mistrust too with online trainers because there's such a wide spectrum. You got the Instagram trainer that's taking pictures in different color outfits and different banded exercises. And then you got, the Rebel Performance, right? Of people just really being intelligent with their training. And I love what you're doing, and it's really inspiring. And I'm sure you're inspiring a lot of other trainers to make a bigger impact. And I kind of want to shift over into that for a little bit because I'm assuming that you reached a point with your in-person business that you were capped out, right? Like you couldn't take on any more clients. Your schedule was maxed out. You were probably burning the candles at both ends, and you were like, how can I make a bigger impact? So tell me a little bit about that story and how you transitioned.
Yeah, so I love coaching in person. I do not love coaching in person being on the floor 10 hours a day.
Yeah.
Like, I just realized that
100%.
early on. I was like, in a perfect world, I will coach 2 to 3 hours in person.
Yeah. Yeah. At your house,
probably
your
2
gym.
hours. Yeah. Like I didn't like having to be up at 4:30 to get to my first session. I didn't like the fact that if I wanted to travel, I was not going to make money because the only time I make money is when I show up in person.
Yeah.
So the classic model for being a personal trainer is very fragile, right? If people have read Nassim Taleb and the anti-fragile concept, you're far too fragile if your only way of making income and money is to show up and train people in person.
Yep. Yeah.
Right. And
you can only trade your time for money for so long.
Yeah, you can't scale it. It's a very difficult one to pull off and to pull off well. Right. So I realized early on, like when I first started, and part of the reasons I did the internships at Cressy Performance and then at iFast was I knew Eric and Mike were doing pretty well online. So I wanted to get some insight into what they were doing and how that whole business model worked. Right. So from the get-go for me, like I knew that I wanted to have a large portion and percentage of what I do come from online because it gives me more freedom, more flexibility. No, that would have been probably 2014.
Okay. Yeah, before really all the online trainers blasted up and it became like a common thing.
Yep.
That's awesome. Yeah, you kind of had the foresight and saw the writing on the wall. But yeah, I think it's such a crucial piece because I think that's what also affects quality training is people who just feel like they're in survival mode and they're just trying to make sure they can eat and sleep and they don't have enough time to dedicate themselves to their passion, and then it drains them, right? Because all the extraneous things to their schedule drain them and don't allow them to be passionate about their industry and get down to the nitty gritty details and learn everything that there is to learn. Because I mean, and the thing is, you always learn, right? Like the person who says they know it all really is doing themselves a disservice. But yeah, I think it's really inspiring to see what a trainer like you does. And I'm just curious kind of what you would talk to, or you would speak to the new trainer who just started working for a couple years. They're already seeing some success. Like, how would you direct them and mentor them accordingly so that they could make a bigger impact? Well, how would you advise them?
So my first question would be, who do you help and what do you help them with?
Just help them get a better, clear idea of how they are a coach, essentially.
Yeah, so what I'm really trying to get after essentially is like, who is their ideal client? Like, who's their target market? Who do you help? What do you help them with? And then within that process, like, you're promising a transformation and an outcome for people. So the first thing I want to know is, can you actually deliver on that? Because if you can't, then you need to go, like, air quotes, back to school and get better at your craft.
Right.
Because
So it's a little bit like micro niching a little bit.
a little bit. Yeah. But like the first question is, can you actually deliver an outcome for people consistently?
Yeah.
If you can deliver an outcome for people, now we're playing a different game. Now it's about marketing and sales. It's about where you're going to be directing your effort and energy. Early in your career, more effort and energy need to be going into getting really good at your craft. So you can help this person with that problem, and you're really good at doing that thing.
Yeah.
The level to which you have to put time, effort, and energy into that is going to be dependent upon who that is, right? If you just help Gen Pop people generally lose weight, look better naked, and feel good, that's a really pretty simple, easy outcome to deliver on. So you don't have as much of a learning curve to get good at delivering that outcome. If you want to, for example, train people to step on stage, win bodybuilding competitions, and threaten to win Mr. Olympia, that is a far more difficult outcome. Your learning curve is far higher, right? But once you get good at delivering this outcome for this person that you help, then like you need to have a shift, and you should be spending pretty much all your time, effort, and energy into figuring out how to get better at this marketing and sales game, so you can help more people, reach more people, have more impact. And ultimately, like, it comes down to the lifestyle that you want. Like, not everybody wants to do online coaching. Like, if you love being on the floor 10 hours a day and that's your jam and you're super happy doing it, keep doing it.
Yeah.
Right. But if you want the capacity to have a little bit more scale, to help more people, to like travel and have some freedom and flexibility, like every single coach should be able to go online and probably make an extra $500 to $1,000 a month. Easily. Right. And like, I do business mentorship separate from Rebel Performance as a personal passion project, because I want to help good coaches be able to get that in their lives, to make that happen. Because it's really like, it's not that hard. It's just like anything else. There are systems, there are models, there's a plan to follow.
Formulaic in a way. Yeah, I think that's fascinating, because I'm definitely one of those idiots that doesn't understand the whole marketing aspect online. But I like kind of where you start first. Is like, let's start with you as the trainer first. Let's talk about what you're effective at and what you're good at. And like you said, who's your ideal client, and really figure out that first before you figure out who you're speaking to in that online space. That kind of that, like, almost the back to your analogy of driving down the road at 120 miles an hour and not knowing where you're going. It's the same thing, I think, when coaches first go online. At least I even experienced that when I first tried to go online. Was I didn't know who I was talking to, and I just like cast this big net, thinking that's how I want to do it. Is I don't want to not miss out on somebody, but in reality, if you're talking about something that's for everyone, then it's for no one in a way. So you got to really make it specific and speak directly to your audience out there, because then the people who are listening, you're going to pick those people out of the crowd, so to speak, that'll gravitate to you. So it's really powerful, just in your approach. Yeah, I don't want to take too much of your time. I just want to get some last questions here. What's your favorite lift?
Ooh, favorite lift is probably a deadlift.
All right. Yeah, I gotta say it's my favorite too. And then, do you have any favorite quotes?
Oh boy, favorite quote.
And it can be more than one.
Yeah, so one of my favorite all-time quotes is the Theodore Roosevelt "Man in the Arena" quote. It's quite long. That one. It's quite long, so I'm probably not going to be able to say it all off the top of my head.
On the spot.
Here, I got the Googs up. I can pull this up. Yeah, so the "Man in the Arena" quote by Theodore Roosevelt. Highly recommended for anybody who hasn't seen it, but it's not the critic who counts, not the man who points out how the strong man stumbles, or where the doer of deeds could have done them better. The credit belongs to the man who is actually in the arena, whose face is marred by dust and sweat and blood, who strives valiantly, who errs, who comes short again and again, because there is no effort without error and shortcoming, but to who does actually strive to do the deeds, who knows great enthusiasms, the great devotions, who spends himself in a worthy cause, who at the best knows in the end the triumph of high achievement, and who at the worst, if he fails, at least fails while daring greatly, so that his place shall never be with those cold and timid souls who neither know victory nor defeat. That is probably my favorite quote of all time.
It's a little wordy. No, I'm just kidding. It's a great quote. That is awesome. Yeah.
It's more like a short paragraph than a quote.
Yeah, right. It reminds me about like some Marcus Aurelius quotes that are like basically yeah, a whole page.
Mhm.
But yeah, that is great. That is really powerful. I never heard him say that. So what does that quote mean to you specifically? And when did you come across that quote?
I came across that quote in high school, and it just,
It stuck with you.
yeah, it just like it's all about
Resonated.
effort. Like you have to show up, you have to put in effort, you have to like it's all about the man who's in the arena. Like there's so many people that want to
Right.
talk, there's so many people who want to not take ownership in their lives, but it's ultimately about the person who's showing up, putting in the effort, putting in the work, and like even if you fail, at least you failed while trying.
Yeah.
Like there's
I think
nothing
that
worse than I think just sitting on your hands and watching life go by. Like
yeah. I think too the other aspect I see, and maybe this is because I didn't learn training in the classroom. I learned it like kind of, in the gym and on the streets, so to speak, right? Kind of coming up in the ranks is there's a difference between theoretical knowledge and practical application. Like
yep,
you can do the research all you want, you can inferences and observations all you want, but until you like get out there and try and do something, you're never gonna fail or know the taste of victory.
yep.
Yeah, that's a great quote. Do you have any more off the top of your head?
So another like a book that's filled with them is, so I'm a huge fan of Naval Ravikant. So the Almanac of Naval is well worth the read. That's
Okay.
full of just gold.
All right. I like it. What are you reading now?
Right now, so I just finished reading, where is it over here? Shape Up.
Okay. I haven't heard of that one.
Yeah, it's good. This book here.
By Ryan Singer. Stop running in circles.
Yep. So it's a book essentially on like work productivity. One of the things that we needed to get a little bit better at Rebel. So we're
Okay.
using this system. If you ever heard of Basecamp, this is from the crew at Basecamp.
Oh,
So
nice.
just kind of
Nice.
pretty much do more or less. Other than that, haven't. What other books are going on right now?
I was just trying to get into the brain of James Cerbie.
I mean, most everything I consume right now is more business, marketing, productivity
Because that's
stuff.
the stage that you're at now. You've kind
Yeah.
of
Yeah, it's like I spent plenty of years doing nothing but reading and researching into human physiology and training, et cetera, et
right.
cetera. So like
Yeah.
this is another important one for if coaches listen to this, like you need to understand what your limiting factor is. My limiting factor right now for what we do and who we help has nothing to do with my training knowledge.
That's so powerful because I think it's
That's not to say I can't get better. I can always get better, but like it's not the thing holding me back right now. So
right. And I think when you're the first trainer learning to come up in the ranks, you're trained by your manager as in like, listen, you just say yes you can and you'll research it after and you'll get them in the door and you're gonna work with them, right?
mm-hmm.
But then eventually you do have to get to a point where you're like, you have to know what you know and then know what you don't know. Because there's a lot of more power in calling yourself out for that reality, and then you just know where to direct your resources so that you get better at your worst part. So that's really good. Well, James, I don't want to take any more of your time, and this was really powerful. I really appreciate you taking the time to interview this, and I know this is going to help a lot of people, whether it's their own personal goals or a lot of trainers getting a better understanding of how they need to shape their journey. So thanks again.
Yeah, Matt, thanks a ton, man. Really enjoyed it.
Cool, man. We'll go enjoy the rest of your Thursday, and I'll probably be seeing you in Excel soon.
Yeah, maybe I may come over there tomorrow. We'll see.
Nice. I'll be there. I'll be deadlifting using their yoke.
Ah, there it is. There it is.
You got it programmed in there, and I love it, man.
Mm-hmm.
Feel heavy through the floor. I swear, it's already added much more stability control into my deadlift. And I'm just excited for the next test weeks because I've never put myself through 1.5 reps or pause reps enough the way that you've trained in the last. I think I've done it for the last like 8 weeks now between 1.5 and pause reps, which, first time I had to go back into the gym and do something I didn't want to do, I was like, fuck. But it's become the norm now. I don't give a shit. It's just I'm excited to see where it's going to take my PRs.
Oh, yeah. Big things, my man. Big things.
All right, James. Thanks a lot. I really appreciate it.
If you're ready to make steps towards improving your health or increasing your performance, book a free 30-minute call today by visiting thinkfitnesslife.com. If you're ready to make steps towards improving your health or increasing your performance, book a free 30-minute call today by visiting thinkfitnesslife.com.